Good morning. It's super early, so thanks for joining us, guys. This is a very special panel today because we're going to be talking about the Kenzo show, but we're also going to be focusing on digital innovation and talking a little bit about what brands have been doing exciting digital things this season. So I have an amazing techie panel with me, but I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Faye.
Thanks. I'm Faye Cowan. I work for Decoded Fashion, and we are an event series that connects emerging tech to fashion and retail brands.
I'm Fiona Mackay. I'm the Director of Digital at Carla Otto, which is an international fashion communications agency.
Hi, I am Zoe Patoff, online editor at Topshop.com.
You're like, that needs no explanation. It's Topshop. Let's start by talking a little bit about Topshop, because I was going to ask sort of who's leading the way with digital innovation this season, but obviously Topshop is always kind of streets ahead. Tell me a bit about what happened this season.
So the last few seasons we've partnered with big corporations like Facebook and Google, and this year we decided that we wanted to find a new and quite up-and-coming developer stroke app to work with. So we started looking around the space, thinking about what was cool, and we came across the idea of sound technology, which is something that a lot of people are talking about. And we found this app called Chirp that we all thought was really fun. And it kind of tied in really nicely with the new gen element of what Topshop do, which is supporting new designers. And we felt like we wanted to support a new app. So we partnered with them. And it's a really fun project, very different in scale to the projects we've done before. But we were all, it was one of those things, as soon as we downloaded it, that everyone in the office was on it, and you could hear that little birdie sound.
Tell me a bit about the app and how it works.
So what the app does is it can send data from one phone to another or to multiple phones via sound. So if you have the app open on your phone, and if you three girls had it open on your phone, I could ping over an image and you'd suddenly get it all on your phone, and it just picks it up via sound.
Does it rely on Wi-Fi too? Or?
Yes, it does. You've got to have the app open. And you've got to be connected to the internet, but it's really fun, and it's just a fun way to share. And it has a really cute little noise, and the branding's really fun. It's like like a little bird, a bit in line with Twitter. It works really well with the Twitter platform. So we were starting to think about what can we do with this really fun app that kind of makes everyone smile, that's really fun, engaging. We thought the customer would find it quite cute, because that's another thing when you're a big brand like Topshop. You've got to think about the customer as well. It's not just about the people at your show or the industry, but as Fashion Week is a way of communicating how Topshop supports Fashion Week, and also Topshop unique to a huge audience. So it has to be something that's easy for our customers to engage with. So it had quite a lot of different dimensions, but for the online user at home watching the live stream on Topshop.com, as the images came down the catwalk, they had the little chirp icon on them, and you could click on it, and it would transmit a sound. And as long as you had that app open on your phone, it would then send the image that you like straight to your phone, and then you tap on it, and it would turn over, and it would give you loads of information about that look. So it might be a quote from Kate Phelan about what had inspired the dress, or how many hours it took to make, or where the beading came from. So it gave the user lots more detail on the pieces they liked. So it was all about giving them insider access and almost like backside access to the show. And we were also chirping lots of images while we were there, which were pulling into a live gallery. So it was just giving a real 360 image of what it's like to go to a fashion show, what goes on behind the scenes, what goes on front of house. We also took that into store. So we created a chirp garden in store, because the icon is a little bird and the sound is like a bird. We decided to create an installation of trees, and so when you wandered around the space in store and you stood underneath it with the app open, it was sending you images, lots of information about the brand, spot prizes. So it really got the user engaged, and they could also watch the live stream of the show in that space. So we were getting really cute tweets. For example, there was a girl who was like, I'm dressed in my Medium Kirchhoff for Topshop dress, stood in the Topshop chirp garden waiting for the Medium Kirchhoff show to start. So we really engaged the user. And then in the Topshop show space, it was in Regent's Park, which was the perfect setting again for an app around birds. So we hung little chirp boxes in all the trees, and as everyone walked into the space, there were lots of noises obviously being emitted, and then images from behind the scenes in hair and makeup, front of house, were being transmitted onto people's phones. So it was just a really fun campaign. That, you know, I think the really important thing for us is that we engage obviously the people at our show, but we also engage the customer, whether that's in store or online if they're not near a flagship. So it was a nice 360.
Yeah. I'm interested that you say you wanted to sort of do an app that was slightly sort of less known than technologies you'd worked with before. Do you find that at Carlotta, Fiona, are some of your clients becoming a lot more accepting of using technology that's a bit more new, slightly less famous? Are people getting a bit more sort of excited by digital, or is it still the big main like Twitter, Instagram?
I mean, they're definitely getting more excited about digital, but I think there's only a few brands that are able to kind of take that leap of faith with smaller apps like Topshop. In general, the brands we work with, they kind of stick to the main platforms. Yeah.
So what kind of platforms are they relying on the most?
So Instagram largely at the moment. You know, Facebook is always in the equation, but I think the main focus is Instagram at the moment, and Instagram video especially.
That's interesting. You work a lot with startups, obviously, at Decoded, and I know that they came and did a little speech to introduce their app at an event you did. Are there any kind of new apps or anything that's coming along that you're excited by? Or that's really putting you on the spot.
Straight away. Well, we see so many different types of technology, and some of the kind of more, I guess, useful or practical stuff is actually the more interesting stuff. So it's more the behind the scenes thing that could affect like how someone does their production, or, you know, analytical reports and stuff like that. It's not always like the pretty stuff. There's a great little startup called Saduck that do augmented reality, and we've been trying to help them sort of introduce them to bigger brands, because it's so, like, the way they do it is so incredible that you can like see within bags, and for luxury it would really work.
So explain to me a little bit about what they do, how they work.
Well, it's augmented reality, so they kind of, I don't know how it actually works, but the way they would do it is they would, on your screen, you would be able to, say if they did it with a bit of furniture, they would show a room and you could have your iPad up and you'd be able to see a chair that wasn't there but it was being put there. So they could do it with a bag, so that you'd be able to look inside the bag even though you weren't inside the bag, if you get what I'm meaning. So it gives you more details. So if you're buying online, you'd be able to look inside. So I guess when you're buying something so expensive that's luxury, you kind of want to see every single bit of it. So it gives you it almost like in a 3D way. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I'll introduce you.
Like, I'll hook you up. So we talked a little bit about Topshop and what you guys did, but I'm interested, has there been any other brands that have stood out for any of you guys this season as doing some really exciting things? I mean, we've had people showing on Snapchat, we've had quite a lot of...
I didn't think that was good.
No, I didn't think it was great either.
Why didn't you guys think that was too strong?
Well, I think the quality of the imagery on Snapchat is not that strong, and it just feels so fleeting. It's almost like an initiative just for the press around it, rather than for the engagement or like the kind of quality of the output. So it felt like a gimmick rather than anything.
It doesn't really do anything for the brand, I don't think. And I think a lot, like there was so much in New York this year that was kind of a bit like, let's just do it for the sake of doing it. And I don't, like, there's no point in that. Like, it's always about, you know, telling the story of your brand and like keeping the integrity of the brand. And I don't think there was anything massively exciting this season.
I quite liked what Tommy Hilfiger did with their social concierge service. I thought that was really smart.
Explain to our viewers a little bit about what
that is. The social concierge service. They had a system whereby it was mostly press could contact Tommy through their social networks and request certain visual assets. So I saw that Mashable almost did a test with it, and they requested that the designer backstage did a thumbs up with one of the models, and they wanted an image of that to use in their feature about social concierge. And within apparently 20 minutes, they had that image. and as well as there were other press that were requesting backstage images, first look images, that kind of thing, and they were getting them within like 20 minutes, half an hour of the request. And I think it's fascinating for two reasons, because the fact that the press can dictate the kind of imagery that's coming out of a show from behind the scenes is really interesting. And also, you know, one of the issues with Instagram when you're at a show is that it is often quite difficult to get good pictures because of lighting or how quickly the models are walking or whatever. So Tommy's kind of negating that by saying, if you didn't get good enough images, we'll send them to you and you can use them on your social networks, and we'll get them to you, you know, during the show, before, like straight after the show. So I just think it's a really interesting way to approach things for them, and it also allows them to control a bit more the kind of the imagery that's coming out of that production, rather than having these blurry, badly lit images. They're saying, you know, we'll provide you with more quality collateral to use.
I think that issue of control I find really interesting. I don't know if you've noticed that with your clients, or if any of you guys have noticed this as well, is people trying to invest a bit more in digital, trying to understand digital a bit more, because they're realising that, you know, they need to be able to take a bit of ownership for that. And if, as you say, if they're letting other people just produce their collateral, it doesn't mean that it perhaps doesn't get across the brand message as well as if they take a bit of ownership. Are you noticing that with your client?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're sort of letting go control a little bit, but still a lot of our Carla Otto's clients try and control how much photography there is, especially iPhone photography backstage.
Sure.
And there are cases where it's absolutely necessary. I mean, we have had some clients where press have come backstage before the show and have taken images and posted them on Instagram before the looks go out. And I mean, the sort of lack of respect for the designer's work and the whole production is astounding that they would actually do that. But it does, you know, necessitate quite a lot of control backstage for that sort of reason. Yeah.
You mentioned Tommy. Is there anything that stood out for you this season, Zoe?
I think Burberry obviously is a strong contender and they always come up, but I do think it was really interesting that they partnered with Apple, which is such a big brand. And in terms of brand affiliation, I thought that was a brilliant fit. And the kind of exposure that Burberry got being placed on the Apple homepage, which, if you imagine what kind of traffic we're talking about, is a brilliant affiliation. I do think, however, that when you're a fashion brand and there's a difference between the press and the consumer, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to navigate that space. So if you're doing tech behind a show, I think you really have to think about what you're trying to achieve. Is it something for press or is it something for the consumer? And I think it can get a little bit blurry when you're doing tech for tech's sake in that space. So I think Burberry was really interesting. Obviously, using the new iPhone with that improved camera was all great, but it was really only output. I don't think it was social in the truest sense, because the consumer actually couldn't really get involved apart from sharing. So I think obviously it depends what the aim is, but I think in terms of a partnership and a good story, that was a brilliant, you know, that was a really good brand tie-up.
So is your aim at Topshop, is that always for the consumer? I'm interested with that.
I think for Topshop, the aim is for the consumer. I mean, we're obviously a high street brand. We've sponsored New Gen for 10 years, so that's, you know, a huge investment for the brand and a really important story that we're so involved with London fashion, that we have great relationships with designers, that we really support them. That also ties into the collaboration element. But, you know, we have this amazing show space and we sponsor the designers to show in that show space, paid for production. You know, we help them really in all elements. So for us, it's a way of communicating that message to our consumer and educating them about London Fashion Week. You know, I can't give you a percentage of how many of the Topshop customers know what Fashion Week is, but there's a huge amount which Fashion Week doesn't mean anything to them. And also, obviously now we show on schedule at Fashion Week with Topshop Unique. It's really about educating the customer about what Topshop Unique is, what that proposition is. You know, that it's designed in-house, we have a team in-house, that it's, you know, made differently, that we have to justify that price point as well and really educate our customer on why they should be buying into Unique. So for us, yes, Fashion Week is very customer focused, and that is why the big campaigns we've worked on that have had a strong tech element, like when we partnered with Facebook and Google and Chirp, it's all around inviting the customer into that Topshop world and giving them access like they wouldn't usually get before. So it's kind of turning the exclusivity of Fashion Week on its head and you know, really getting them involved. And I think for us, you know, that's when we work on a project, that's one of the things that really governs the ideas. But we're a high street brand. It's very different to what a luxury brand would do. But I do think that space is very interesting.
Talk to me about that difference, because Fiona, you work with luxury brands. Is it as sort of consumer focused, or is there a definite difference, would you say, between the aims of a high street brand and the aims of a luxury brand? So it's a really tough question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the brand, and it depends. Around Fashion Week, I think it is the moment for the brands to kind of reach a wider audience. So there's a balance between press, consumer, and it's just in general a balance. But I think, you know, in terms of that, I think it's how brands are trying to figure out how they can leverage Fashion Week to not be the only spike in kind of communication around the brand where they're reaching a wider consumer. It's how do you kind of extend that engagement beyond just, you know, during the shows.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because we've talked a little bit, you've all kind of hinted at this idea of tech for tech's sake, and like Fashion Week comes, people do something really exciting and then it kind of peters off and we go back to this normal state where consumers perhaps aren't engaging as much. Did you kind of mentioned this with the Snapchat thing, both of you, did you interpret that a little bit this season? Do you think people are starting to use tech as a trend, and is that a bit dangerous? Faye, what do you think?
Well, it's how you use it, and at the end of the day, so if they're using it in the right way, it's fine. But if it depends kind of on the brand. I think if Topshop did something that wasn't so good, it would be forgotten about quite quickly, because they're always using social and they use digital in that way.
They're kind of expected to.
And it's expected to like try things that are fun, or and kind of it's a bit throwaway in that sense. Whereas if, you know, what Burberry did this season was really show themselves as being like paired with top tech to say that like, hey, we're the top brand doing digital. So that was really clever of them. So I guess, I don't know if it's a trend. The thing is, you know, we talk about tech, but it's not really tech. It's like social media and digital, whereas actually the things that are changing now should be more the way brands are taking control of their e-commerce sites. And this year's been a massive change for like Proenza Schuler launched their new site. Even Victoria Beckham, like she launched it, and it's pretty perfect. Like it's a really good, like the way she's executed it amazingly. So I think seeing in terms of that, like in the next year, we'll see so much change of people doing that, and that's really taking control of their own brands and being able to like have that ultimate control and say, this is how I'm going to display it, this is how I'm going to sell it, I know exactly what's going in, what's going out, that kind of thing.
That's interesting, because that goes back to what you were saying about some of the new sort of startups and apps that you're excited about. Do you think we've kind of reached this kind of an apathy level with social media type innovation, and actually it's more exciting to see people doing stuff that's less surface level and more about, as you say, sort of
behind the scenes type thing? Yeah, I mean, there's one, like, the thing is, Twitter's always going to be the best for summing up shows quickly and like putting your message out really fast, and Instagram is great, but like Facebook doesn't really affect shows as you go, I don't think. I mean, it's, you know, it's not a quick...
No, it's more for post-show coverage, they use it.
So, I forgot what I'm saying, but behind... What were the questions?
But I think what's interesting this season is how designers have started to use the show to drive sort of interest and capture data for e-commerce. So I saw that Marc Jacobs, instead of their usual banner ads that they would have on, you know, the top fashion sites, selling the current collection season, they were selling the season that's just shown, and you could reserve it. And so that's kind of driving people to the site. There's data capture because they have to enter their email addresses. It's kind of capturing next season's customer already, and obviously leveraging the buzz from the show that just happened. And I think that was a really smart strategy of theirs, and something I haven't seen before.
We've done customised catwalk, as have Burberry, and you know, that's a lot of brands are doing that now. But that is really interesting because you can see what your users are deciding to customise and which looks they're gravitating towards. And if you start feeding that back to a merchandising team, that becomes really interesting because it can start to dictate the buying pattern. So I think social definitely does have a purpose in terms of supplying the business with data. It's whether that's whether there's resource to actually look into that and then filter it out the other way, which is, I'm not quite sure we've got to a point where that data is being used, you know, to its full capacity. But I think moving forward, that will definitely be something that's interesting. So, for example, when we partnered with Facebook, we developed something called Shoot the Show, which while you were watching the unique show, you could click on a little camera and it kind of took a screen grab of the live stream and automatically posted it to your Facebook page. So I think that's quite an interesting example where Facebook can be used in a live environment. I think it's about facilitating the different social channels and really thinking, what do they offer and what can I use them for? So that was really interesting for us because we could see from the huge user base that had logged in to watch the show live what they were sharing with their friends, which is obviously where their personal taste inclinations are.
And how exactly was that data used? Did you use that did that affect the pieces that went into production?
I think the collection's bought like a, you know, as with, it's bought in a traditional sense. So the buyers then look at the collection that's created. But we definitely looked at that data when we were, you know, looking at numbers and also, you know, what kind of models people are most excited about. It can lead into lots of different things. So as expected, that season was really when Cara was at her height. So no surprise to any of us, the most shared image was of Cara walking down the catwalk. So that can also tie into bigger marketing ideas. So, you know, when we came to do Topshop and Google projects, and we had this idea around models, and there was a real fascination into the girls who were in the fashion show with personalities like Cara and Jordan. We then also had an idea of which models to use that our customers were really interested in. So for that project, that was a huge project, but one element of it was that in the lead up to Fashion Week, we got Rosie Tapner, Cara, Delevingne and Jordan Dunn to keep Fashion Week diaries for us on Google+, which was really interesting, and it was interesting to see how the customer was engaging with that content, and that's actually what they were most interested in that season, was the idea of the model as personality. And that led to us putting cameras into the model's handbag. So for the first time ever, as they walked down the catwalk, you could see what they were seeing. So you could see the catwalk through the model's eyes. So we kind of turned the idea, you know, of what Fashion Week was in a live stream on its head a little bit. And that was a really interesting project to work on because it was very much around the personalities of these British girls who were, you know, very much had been in the Topshop family for a long time, who we'd worked with and who had come up through Unique, you know, walking for season after season. So I think it, you know, when we talk about different social channels, I think, yeah, all of them do different things, and it's trying to figure out what channels you're focusing on and what you think they can do for you, rather than taking content and then putting it across all of the social channels without really any strategy. But I also think something interesting, which we touched upon, is thinking back to basics. So you can, you know, brands can do big technology stories around Fashion Week, but if they don't have the basics there, it's kind of a little bit of a lost effort. So you've got to think about mobile, you've got to think whether all the looks on your website have social sharing enabled. And when you actually start to look at brands that are doing tech projects, and then you go onto their site and there's actually a lot of the basics missing, I think they've lost their way a little bit, because that's what they should be focusing on, fully enabling their sites to work in this omni-channel world that we're in, rather than putting huge budgets into tech stories that will make press before they have the basics right.
Did you guys notice quite a lot of that as well, this kind of, forgetting the basics, but trying to, we mentioned the Snapchat thing, but trying to kind of make a splash, using digital as a PR exercise? Yeah,
I think you see it quite often where, there's a story around it, you might click onto the website, and it's just extremely clunky to use. And I'm not going to mention any names, but there was a couple, as I've sort of been following Fashion Week since New York, and some have done microsites, for instance, and you go onto the microsite, it's just so confusing. And it just leaves you wondering where the benefit is for the brand. They've obviously invested quite a lot into doing this microsite and this initiative, but it's so difficult to navigate that. You said the benefit for the brand. I'm really interested in that, because it seems like no one's quite sure with digital what the benefit for the brand is. It's a bit about engaging customers. It's a bit about, collecting data. Do you think there is a slight element of confusion when no one's quite sure why they're doing what they're doing? Is it the best brands, they know exactly what they want to get out of it? Well, I mean, it sounds like Topshop knows exactly what they want to get out of it.
Yeah, I think we know what we want to get out of it. For us, it's all about educating the customer and making the customer excited about the brand and engaging with the brand. I think for us, you know, from Unique, yes, people might pre-order and they might reserve pieces and customize the catwalk, etc. But it's not a money-making exercise for us.
Yeah.
It builds excitement for when the collection lands next season. But obviously, we're in a very fast fashion world. So I think at that moment in time for us, it's about, you know, making people really excited about what Topshop is and what they're doing and getting them involved. So we're getting our customer involved with something that they'd never usually have access to.
Sure.
And I think for me, working with a high street brand, that's been really, really exciting. And I think engagement is everything. I think you can do projects, and if your customers aren't engaging, then it's futile. And that for me is how you know whether a project has worked or not. I think digital projects are hard to prove ROI behind, especially around Fashion Week. But if you can engage that customer and get them excited for when the collection lands, it's a marketing piece. And also making your brand stand out. We're in a very clustered world with so much information that it's how do you know, really get people to invest in your brand and buy with you. And you know, for a high street brand, maybe that's a little bit different than luxury brands.
But I think that objective is pretty much across the board, making people excited for the brand, to become advocates. But beyond that, you know, she's saying with kind of data and ROI and conversion to sales, it's much more difficult to kind of say, well, that's what they're trying to achieve, or that's what they did achieve. And even, you know, the leading brands in digital like Burberry, they don't sort of pretend to have all the answers for what their digital strategy is actually doing for them.
Yeah.
They don't have hard facts and figures to prove, you know, the ROI on that. So
is that where you're seeing some of the most interesting startups happening, though? It is in that capturing data in a much more effective way?
I get, and knowing what to do with it and how to display it to the team at a big brand, and how, you know, so when the problem is you get so much data and no one knows what to do with it, so you're collecting it and you're like, okay, I've got this, now what? So a lot of sort of startups up and coming now, we see they're presenting it in a really nice dashboard so that when a buyer or a merchandiser sees it, they kind of understand it rather than they have to go through things bit by bit. I think that's really important for sort of within teams in different brands. You've got a very sort of, there's some people that are kind of maybe our generation that are, you know, early adopters and will like take on new things and understand it, whereas you've got another level of people that are still really like old-fashioned or not, you know, but they do things in a certain way. So if they see something new and they don't understand it, they're just like, nah, I don't want it. Why would I spend the money on it? So I guess,
So that's what some of the startups are trying to challenge. They're trying to simplify it in a way.
I think so. Like, it's an easier way for brands to see things, but the problem they have is like then getting into those brands.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is the uptake of that quite strong?
Yeah, but it's literally, if you meet, it's the same as in anything in fashion. If you meet the right person and they like it, then you'll get it in. But it's like what we try and do is try and, you know, help those relationships by, if we see a startup that we think will work well within one brand, and I would say like to Fiona or something, you should take a meeting with this guy and see if it's something for your brand. But it's still very difficult because, you know, most like tech startups, they're geeky guys or whatever, like, and they think, you know, not even, but they don't know how to like approach someone in that kind of in that role. So that's kind of where they fall down, because there's so many great ideas and like so many exciting things, but if you don't know how to present it to the right person, then how do you get through?
But would we say that fashion is an open-minded environment to digital? Do you find that, would you not?
Well, in certain ways. I think a lot of probably stuff, particularly like with London Fashion Week and the way Natalie Massenet is now changing sort of things, there'll be a lot more focus for it, and she will also be, the way they're running things will be like educating all the brands and the smaller designers and how to use it. But you know, fashion is open in some ways, but there's a lot of closed doors as well. So I think a lot with the smaller labels, like they really need to, in order to survive, they really need to understand all aspects, because most of them are like, you know, they're small teams trying to do stuff and they're not really aware of everything. And then that's when you have like social media disasters where like a small team's trying to do something because they think they have to, but they don't know why.
Yeah.
So
Do we think there's quite a lot of that, people doing things and not quite understanding why, and there's quite a lot of wasted information or wasted resource, so whether it's wasted data because there's so much that people don't know how to use it, or whether it's this Twitter account that people are kind of half doing? Do we think that's quite a common pattern?
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, I think there's also nothing wrong with trying something out.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's just going to evolve so that, you know, certain brands might realize that actually they've started a Twitter account and actually it's not where they're not getting any success or kind of reaching their customer through it, so they might just focus on Instagram only. And, you know, each platform is really different.
People are quite scared to do that. I feel like there's quite a common attitude of, well, we have to be across every channel. You know, people are scared of going, all right, Instagram's working really well for us, we're going to just focus on Instagram.
I mean, I think for the major brands, they probably should be on all platforms because there's different users on different platforms, and if they're selling if they have e-commerce, then yes, of course they should have Twitter because it's also an important customer service channel. So, but I just think it you know, as you said, it's about understanding exactly what each platform is for.
Sure.
And
I think there's definitely a danger of just thinking, right, we've got one content strategy, we don't have enough resource, and we're going to put that same content across every channel.
yeah.
And in some cases, it's very much wasted effort. So I think, you know, earlier brands who were early adopters of Facebook have big numbers, but if you're going to start a Facebook page from scratch now, that is the hardest place to get the numbers, because people see Facebook much more as a personal space, and you know, there's advertising and sponsored stories, and I think, you know, some people are falling out of love with that channel, and Instagram has kind of not come out of nowhere, but for fashion brands, they have amassed huge amount of followers on Instagram and they've only been on there a year, whereas they might have been on Facebook for 2 or 3 and they're not seeing the kind of engagement or interaction. So I think you have to look at that space and negate where is the best place for your brand and what you're doing on that brand, what you're doing on that channel, and why. But
why has Instagram sat so well with fashion brands? Is it just because it's so visual? Is it as simple as that?
I think people who work in fashion are visual, and I think for designers, you know, what I love about Instagram is, like we're talking about with Matthew Williamson, which is a great example, that Matthew's actually on Instagram himself and he's posting content, and that to me is a fascinating idea. And it's probably much easier for him to take an image of something he's finding inspiring than to write something in 140 characters. So I think because it is visual, it's an easier thing for creative people to use and to understand. And there's, you know, lots of old sayings like, one image captures 1,000 words, you know, plenty of other things. I think Twitter is still a really important channel, but I do think that visual element on Instagram is highly addictive.
Yeah, super addictive. Let's talk a little bit, because we're obviously here a little bit to talk about Kenzo. Are you guys sort of up to speed with what Kenzo do? What do you think of their digital strategy? I won't put anyone on the spot, so anyone can kind of volunteer.
Well, I really like their magazine, Kenzine, I think they call it.
Yeah.
Because it's not only branded content, they kind of create the world of Kenzo through it, and they cover kind of editorial topics, cultural topics that are within their world, and I really appreciate that. Coming from a kind of editorial background myself, I think there's so many more ways to communicate to your fan than just by pushing a product the whole time. And they do really interesting collaborations, like with Toilet Paper magazine, which is brilliant. And I just think they're like quite a curveball with what they do, and I really appreciate it. I think, what else do I like about Kenzo? It's just, it all works together really well. So their digital strategy is perfectly married with the brand image, and also the way that they work with interesting contributors. So their filmmakers are up and coming, you know, young talents like Lisa Packlet and Quentin Jones, and it's just people that they almost kind of put a seal of approval on some of these rising talents, which I think is fantastic. They take a chance with them.
What's great about Kenzo, that is such an energetic young brand, and they've, you know, they are one of the few luxury brands don't seem to be so precious. They have a really fun, they look at everything in a very fun, lively way, which obviously marries itself with the, what they're trying to do. But I love, as Fiona said, that they're collaborating with Rands and with Caps, and they're kind of producing these lower price point items that people who can't afford £1,000 coat can buy into the brand and can get excited about it. And I love that they brought the logo back. I think, and no one wanted to wear logos. Everything had gone super clean, non-branded, bags with tiny Celine, people, it had become kind of uncool. And I think that tiger jumper I remember one fashion week, everywhere you looked, there were those girls wearing those jumpers with the tiger on. And for them, I think just finding that one thing that they were going to push was a brilliant marketing idea. And I think if you look at them digitally, they've not been around, the new Kenzo hasn't been around for very long, and they've got a strong presence on all digital channels, and I think that's really interesting. And as Fiona said, I think, the guys behind Kenzo are really cool, and they're not afraid to let people into that 360-degree remit of what's inspiring them, what they're cooking. I think, that's really interesting for a brand like Kenzo. And they did that with opening ceremony, so they're used to marketing their brand as much more than a fashion label.
Yeah, it's lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm interested that you say kind of, a lifestyle choice. So I was going to ask that, is that when digital works most effectively, when it seems to be really, really authentic? Do you find that, Faye, when it feels to be like an extension of what the brand is already about?
I mean, I think stuff like Paul Smith's, when he does taken by Paul photos, I just love it, because and you imagine it's cute, and you know that it's him doing it, and okay, he sends his photo off to whoever for them to put on Instagram, but it's a photo that he's showing you his bits around the world, and I think that really makes you connect, because I don't think, like, for them it's important to be hugely strong in digital. Like, it's not really like their kind of feeling, but it's important for you to feel like you know Paul Smith, because he's like the brand, he's the man that is the brand, and I think that is a really nice thing to do.
Similar with Diane from Furstenberg, when she does her tweets that are sort of love Diane, and the way that she's so excited about Google Glass and shop the hangout with Google, and it's just, it's infectious, her enthusiasm for it all. And we were sort of asking about brands that were doing digital well, and sorry to go off the topic of Kenzo, but it's, I think they do a fantastic job too, and it's really a lot of it driven by Diane's own enthusiasm for it. And I think it's similar, you see it with Kenzo and the kind of creative output of what they do across all channels.
I think when you've got a confident personality at the helm of your brand, who's not an introvert, it's a lot easier. But not all brands have that luxury of having someone who is comfortable with sharing what they're doing and creating content in that way. And I think that's where it's more challenging. For a lot of these brands with very strong figureheads, who are very used to being in the public eye and the public space, it's a lot easier because there's a lot more content there. I think what's really challenging, and especially for some luxury brands, is they don't have that person who's comfortable in that space, and therefore it's very difficult to create content that's genuinely interesting.
What do we think? I really want to go to the live stream, but I do have one more question. What do we think about the fact that one of sort of London's brightest stars, so Christopher Kane, doesn't engage with sort of digital? What's your thought? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but do we quite like it in it? Is it quite refreshing? Tom Ford's another example where really sort of pulled back from digital. What do we think of brands though?
I think it's kind of interesting because Tom Ford, he's letting a little bit go now, because was it last year when he had a closed collection, and it was received quite badly, to be so exclusive, because now, the way it is, if you have to be in the public eye, because that's what the world is like right now. Everything is seen by everybody, so to be too exclusive, it's difficult, I think, and I think that was quite bad for him, and I think he probably was affected by it.
So you think it looks quite lofty to sort of stay away?
I think it,
I think with Christopher Kane, it's not like he's made a statement like Tom did. But, and I wouldn't say that it's like a missed opportunity. Well, perhaps it is a missed opportunity. I'm a huge fan of Christopher Kane, and I wish that I could engage, with the brand more, and to sort of have more visual content from the brand, and to understand more about what goes behind the scenes.
Especially as Christopher and Tammy, they're such engaging personalities.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you go backstage after a Christopher Kane show, and journalists are asking him what inspired the collection, his references are so far-flung and off the wall that actually it'd be really fascinating if he was filling a digital space with those ideas. And what was interesting to him, I think he does have one of those personalities, I think, that would work really well, you know, would translate into really interesting digital content. But I think they'll have to move into that space now. Now that they've, you know, been acquired, I think that won't be optional. So I suppose it's how they navigate that.
Like, we want more Christopher Gray.
We're excited.
Should we go and have a look at the Kenzo live stream then and see what they've been doing? I have a couple of topics I want to discuss as we're watching the stream. The first of which, quite aptly, is live streaming. What do you guys think about live streaming? It's kind of become the thing that everyone feels like they have to do. Is that a bit of a fast? Is it as important? Hey, what's your thoughts on streaming?
I think it's really important. It reaches such a huge audience. Like the numbers for New York Fashion Week have had, I don't know what it was, but it was massive. And it's like, it connects to so many other people everywhere in the world. And I think it's a great thing.
I think live stream is really great, but I think also it puts pressures on designers to do something really interesting with the set, which we're seeing here. So I think if you don't have a lot of budget to do a live stream and you're, you know, really using a simple catwalk and you've maybe got 3 or 4 cameras and you're just giving a very straight view, it's not always that interesting and you don't get that close to the close. So I think, you know, initially that's what we were seeing from live streams, but I think now you really need a creative director to be in charge of your live stream, to cut it up, to make it interesting, and I think sets really help. So what we're watching now is obviously visually really stimulating, so that really helps with the live stream. It's more engaging.
And I think it's also sort of techniques with the camera and having the budget for the production to be able to create sort of beautiful panoramic shots as well as detailed close-ups. I always log on to the Prada live stream because I just think that the way that they shoot the live stream is phenomenal. It's like watching, it's really an emotional experience of the way, through the way that they shoot it. And you know, it really does come down to budget to be able to do something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were watching the Balenciaga stream the other day and it's literally just this like tiny webcam on the floor. And you're kind of like, what is the point of this? Who gets streaming right then? You mentioned Prada, and I know people talk a lot about Burberry streams. Are there any other brands that you think do it really well?
Kenzo?
Yeah.
My attention's kind of gone now. I'm just looking at that little bow crop.
Yeah, we can do some shopping now and then we'll go back to digital. Did you notice that at Topshop though? I'm interested in that point of how it's forced people to kind of up their game with their sets again. I think there was a while where sort of theatrics and fashion seemed to kind of sort of slip away in terms of fashion, and we had very simple shows. Do you think people are having to up their game again now because they want people to engage and it's not actually that engaging to just watch a model?
I mean, at Topshop we never have really extravagant sets.
Yeah,
it's not something that we do. It's always quite simple. But we always have, I think music is really important on a live stream, and that is something that's really difficult to get right because the tracks come in from the designer or whoever's doing the music for the designer. They can chop and change. You've got to get licensing for them. So I think that's something, you know, there's nothing more awful than watching a really great live stream that has what sounds like lobby music over the top.
That happens a lot with the London shows. It's really sad.
Yeah, and it kills it because the music is such an expression of what that show is and what message they're trying to get across. So I think, you know, that's something we've focused at Topshop in the last few seasons, is trying to get the music right, because that's such a big part of our show and such a big part of who the girl is. So the last few seasons we've had iTunes widgets on the site, so as you're watching the show you can purchase the music, and we find that's really popular. Because it's something that our customers can engage with really quickly, and I think that's a really nice add-on. And we've also done things like being able to shop the makeup that the models are wearing straight away, and so it's kind of those small things that our customers can engage with.
I think with live streams you also have to think about the fact that the shows nearly always start late. So what kind of pre-show entertainment are you going to offer to the viewer that's logged on at the time the show's meant to start? And brands have started to do a lot more of that. So I saw last season Kenzo had Susie Bubble doing interviews, which was quite interesting and perfect because obviously she's sort of a friend of the brand. And you've seen it with Marc Jacobs and Leandra Medine from Man Repeller. And I think they also need to, if brands want to live stream, they have to think about these kind of things too. So what additional kind of content or viewing can you offer to incentivize people to actually log on and watch the show?
So when we did the Google project, we did live Google Hangouts backstage and front of house, which was massively risky and had us all feeling quite nervous, but was actually amazing because girls at home could actually watch Hannah Murray doing the makeup look in real time. And then as we had our front row arriving, they were giving little anecdotes about what they loved about Topshop or what they were excited to see, and I think that kind of thing really resonated with the fans far beyond from looking at the clothes. It kind of built that world around the clothes, and I think that's really important when you're trying to communicate what your brand's about.
Yeah. And you see a lot more also creating content during the show, and then the turnaround from maybe they've live streamed, but then they also release the video for on demand within 24 hours, and there's a whole video that's being created. I just saw the one for D Squared, and they'd done this amazing sort of backstage film with the designers and the models, and the theme was kind of the Tiki Girl, so it was really effervescent and fun, and it was just brilliant because nobody's really it's much less interesting to just log on and watch a stream of a show.
Especially if you have to wait for 40 minutes and you're not quite sure what's going on.
Yeah, or even just the day after to just watch the girls come down the catwalk. If they're adding content that's kind of fun and really interesting on top of that, then it makes it much more reason to kind of...
I think there's quite easy ways as well for brands to make live streams more engaging, even if they don't have big budgets. So if they pull a Twitter stream in, with all the front row, everyone at the shows is sharing what's going on. So you can almost get content from people attending your show and populate your website with that. And I think there are quite easy ways to make live stream experience more interesting. You can pull in an Instagram feed using the Kenzo hashtag, for example. So even if you don't have the money or the budget to do something interesting before the show, at least populate your page with content that's already being put out there. So I think you just need to think about what's there and what you can use. It's not always things that you have to create. I mean, the people at your show are often your biggest brand advocates. So why not use the content that they're creating?
And actually on the topic of Instagram, it's interesting because you can see more and more designers that are creating show sets that are almost, I think, Instagrammable. And in that letter that Natalie Massenet put out before London Fashion Week, she actually did a direct call out to designers and said, make your show interesting, make it sort of picture worthy. And I think we're seeing more and more of that this season with these incredible sets and just Instagram moments right there.
Alex Wang's set at Balenciaga was quite interesting. I don't know if you guys saw that with all the mirrors, and it felt really, really engaging when you saw the stills from that, because you could actually see the back of the model's looks on a flat image, and it's kind of, people always talk about that with when you're looking at the collections online, that you just get this flat look, and I think he kind of got around that, and I thought that was really interesting.
I absolutely loved what Nazir Mazar did, which obviously he's a headwear designer, new gen, and he always does really fun, upbeat presentations in the Topshop show space. And this season, his troupe of girls, they created like a photo studio, kind of like a lookbook, and they were all taking selfies of themselves. And I thought that was so fun. So he had Anna Trevelyan in his show, the stylist, and she's wearing the clothes, taking a selfie, sharing it on her social platform. Now, of course, that's not right for a lot of brands, but for him, I thought that was just brilliant. And that was playing into a trend right now where everyone's talking about selfies. And I thought that was very clever use of, a digital idea for a small designer.
What do we think? We've talked a lot about how beautiful this set is, and obviously we've got the rain, and it looks absolutely incredible, and it's brilliant that it's streamed. But what do we think of brands that do something really extravagant and exciting like this? Like Cowan's show, everyone's talked about that, but it wasn't streamed. What do we think of that? Does it just seem like a real missed opportunity? Do you think there was a conscious decision there? And it's hard to speculate, but...
I don't know about the streaming. I mean, I went to look at it first on style.com, as one does, and I just got so frustrated looking at the still images that I had to then go and search for the video. So, but he obviously hadn't communicated in advance that he was going to do this show. So if he had, then perhaps it would have been worth the live stream. But I'm sure that video on demand is going to get a lot of views as it is.
So you don't think the immediacy is that important?
No, I think it depends how you... I mean, as Topshop and Burberry do, they always do huge marketing pushes before their shows to communicate exactly what you're going to do. You create videos. and not every brand wants to do that. They want to have the kind of surprise of the actual event without communicating too much in advance. So it just depends. I think brand by brand.
For me, I think if that show had been live streamed, with the amount of, when I was on my Twitter feed, every single tweet was about the Rick Owens show,
for sure.
and it must have trended, if not, globally on Twitter. And I think, they could have done something like live stream into Twitter last minute, and I think the engagement on that would have been amazing. So for me, I feel that was such a performance and such a statement that was would have been a really amazing live stream, and I know I would have logged on and definitely watched it.
Yeah, that's true. I would too.
Yeah, me too. Can we watch that little interview they did again, Neil? Sorry. So while we were talking, basically they've done a little interview right at the end of the show, which is kind of a very digital version of the backstage interview. Can we get audio on it as well? Thank you.
I just love these two.
Yeah. It's quite bad quality.
Fishing.
What do you think of a designer doing something like this, because I've rarely seen designers on their own streams. I think this is one of the first times I've seen that.
I think it's nice. It's a good way of communicating the show afterwards, because and understanding where it's come from. So, and they're cute.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
I want to talk a little bit about social media, because going back to the Kenzo jumpers, which you can't really get away from ever if you work in fashion, but I'm interested if you guys think that social media has in any way changed the kind of clothes that seem fashionable and the clothes that designers are putting out there. A good example of that is the statement sweater. Even Christopher Kane did that Patoff sweater this season, lots of statement sweaters, and perhaps it's the wrong collection to talk about this with, because while there's a lot of print, there aren't as many logos on this collection as we perhaps would have expected. But do you guys think that social media, particularly Instagram, has actually changed the way designers are designing? Are we seeing more statement logo type stuff? Because obviously you can't see cut or fit that well on Instagram. It's very visual.
Yeah, it's all about the prints and colours and strong statement pieces. But it's difficult to say if that's a trend
by that.
Or if it was influenced by social
Yeah, I
media.
don't know whether it's definitely influenced by social media. I think it's probably a commercial decision as well. So those pieces that we see on bloggers that get shared on Instagram, those pieces become the hits of the collection, and obviously commercially, from a business point of view, it makes sense to do versions of that and repeats of those because they know they're going to sell well. But I think there are funny blogs, like I don't know whether you've seen Shit Bloggers Wear by Cecilia Dunn, which is brilliant. And she basically, she goes on all the blogs and she sees what those key pieces are that people are wearing, and then she illustrates them. So, there definitely, of course, is a trend for what we're seeing on social media and what people are sharing that they're wearing. But I wouldn't say that designers, I think as Fiona said, it's difficult to say whether that's influencing what they're designing, but it's probably definitely influencing the buyers. So from a commercial point of view, what they're buying into.
Well, if you go the new Browns Focus, I think it's amazing, but if you go down there, it's literally just like an Instagram diary. It's fashionable, it's like all these slogans and logos, and I don't know, sometimes it worries me a little bit when I put my sort of conservative hat on and I think, is it going to stop people focusing on fit? They're just trying to focus on a next big splash.
But I think, this is a very recent trend, and yes, Instagram has kind of blown up at the same time as this trend has, but if you look back 2 or 3 years ago when Phoebe Philo and Celine was so huge and you couldn't look on any blog without seeing it, and that's, a totally different aesthetic, but, there was like the Phoebe Philo files that everyone was calling them. Everyone was wearing them on the blogs and the editors, etc. And that was equally as popular and set off an entire trend, and that had nothing to do with social media. I don't think it was just extremely popular.
I think also, as Fiona's just touched on, that logo kind of out there aesthetic that we're seeing at the moment is a reaction against simplicity that has been so strong for a lot of seasons. I think over the last few seasons, fashion's just taken especially in London, a very print heavy, a very young kind of fun angle, and we're moving away a little bit from that simplicity, and I think that's just tidal.
Okay, that's good. It's not too Instagram focused. So what is going to be the future for, obviously the future for digital, that's a massive question, but what do you think are going to be the next big thing for fashion? You've mentioned some startups you're excited about, but are there any kind of trends that you can foresee?
I think 3D printing, because in the next year, that's going to be, like, you've now got the ability to sort of do finishings on shoes and accessories and bags, and obviously we're still like however many years away from fabrics, but to be able to do that is going to be massive and like affect the way the industry works and production and all these kind of things. So I think that's, to see how that develops in the next year is going to be interesting.
Do you think that'll start a trend for being able to buy, not even a trend, but an ability to be able to buy looks much more sort of instantly once they're shown? Because obviously we're going to have to wait 6 months to get all of this.
Well, I don't know, probably.
Would we like
it's going to be a long time?
It's going to be a long time before that works and that, because I don't think it's, even though it's a faster process and stuff, but we're still so far away from it. I think...
and you still have to design the programs
and all this kind of thing. There's I think it was a designer who produced, I think it was a jewellery collection, I might be wrong, and she just sold it online and only made the pieces, 3D printed the pieces that people wanted to buy on demand. So it was like an interesting way of doing it, and then there's no waste either. So she was, you know, so it gives you that ability to do it in that sense.
Are you guys equally excited about 3D printing? Is there anything else that you think is going to be the next big thing in terms of tech, digital?
I think the next big thing for brands to figure out, and I don't think anyone's really nailed this, is how to tie up the online and in-store experience. And I think for me that's what's really exciting. So obviously I work for Topshop, and we have that amazing flagship in Oxford Circus, but how do we link that up to the website, and how do we link the website up to the store, and how do we interact with the customer in the world where she's on her mobile, she's at home on her computer, then she goes into store? How do we create services that make shopping easier, and link up those two things? Because I think there's lots of brands with great stores and there's lots of brands with great websites, but they don't interconnect at the moment.
It's not enough just to have an iPad in a store.
No, so whether it's you walk into store and there's a map that shows you, where everything you've saved into your favourite list on Topshop.com in store via tagging, or whether you select what you want online and you can book an appointment in personal shopping and it's there waiting for you. Lots of different things. I think that's what's really exciting for retail is around service and making shopping easier for people, and how we tie that up.
But I was reading somewhere that, I can't remember who was saying it, but that there is a lot more capabilities than we're aware of for retailers to actually capture data as soon as you enter a store, just through your mobile phone or whatever, but because of privacy issues, they aren't doing that yet. And I think it's also a question of how much the customer is willing to give away when they walk in a store, because sometimes we do just want to be anonymous, and we don't want sort of the salesperson to have all of our data the minute we step in. So I think it's a sort of delicate balance in that way too, but I agree it's one of the most interesting spaces.
And figuring out, especially with apps, shopping on mobile, I think people getting their mobile strategies right is also really key right now, because we're all shopping. I've certainly started shopping on my phone, which isn't something I would have thought, doing. But when I was after something on Net-a-Porter, and as soon as it came in, I was on the bus and I was like, I'm just going to buy that on my phone. So I think shopping behaviour is changing, and brands have to make sure that they're in those spaces, to enable that.
And I think social shopping is also really interesting. When when the sort of concept of it first came out, the idea of, as you're shopping, sharing something with a friend, I didn't understand it, but social endorsements through your own network and through celebrities and kind of editors, etc., is really interesting. And Net-a-Porter have just released a new app, haven't they? I haven't been able to use it yet, but
I have.
You have? And how is it? I like it. It's interesting. You can kind of see, they've only released it to like influential people, but no, I'm not influential. I'm not influential, but I just have. I'm not an influential person, but you can see obviously exactly what those influencers are looking at and buying and putting in their lists and stuff like that. So it's a nice way of doing it, and it's quite. I like the actual design of it. It's quite nice because it literally is like a book, like
the way they've done it, but obviously a digital book, and I think that's great.
And you can shop directly through it.
Yeah, you can shop directly through it. So it'll be interesting when they open it up to the public, but they've also got the kind of thing of, you know, they have on the site where you can see what people are looking at and putting in their bags around the world. The world, I don't know what it's called anyway, but they do that within that as well. So you kind of, the products they show you first of all, you're because people are looking at them and they tell you how many people are and that kind of thing. So it gives you an idea of what's popular and influential in that sense.
So you can also buy totally off trend.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah, that is good actually.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned some of the innovations that we're excited about. What are the brands that we're going to be looking to? Obviously Burberry, obviously Topshop. Are we going to be looking at Kenzo? Who's going to be, maybe Saint Laurent? Is there any brands that we're excited to see how their digital develops? Again, I'll throw that to you.
I think it'd be interesting to see, particularly, I guess, in Italy and like Paris, how those brands that show there just generally develop, because particularly in obviously Milan, there's been a lot of focus this year on them coming forward into a digital age, and we're not really seeing anything that much at the moment. Like, it's not like, you know, we've got 5 old guys sitting on a council saying we're going to do this, but there's no real show of it. But I think, you know, that will develop in the next few years, and then I think is it Armani that has the area that he gives to young designers to show
show
in.
space,
And that's kind of interesting that they're doing stuff like that, and so it'll be interesting to see that.
To see some of the more old-fashioned brands.
How they react.
As well as that, which is, you know, it's interesting, like Fendi this fashion week just launched their Twitter account, and that would be really interesting to see how they navigate that space. I'm really excited to see how emerging designers like Christopher Kane figure out that space and what they do with it, because there's so much potential for them. And, you know, in all facets of the industry, I think it would be really interesting to see what they do digitally and how that changes their business.
From such a clean slate, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So the outtake from this panel is more Christopher Kane. That's what Well, thank you so much, guys. That was absolutely fascinating. That's brilliant.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Cool. That was amazing. I feel like we covered everything. There's so many more questions, but I was like, we can't go on forever.
Yeah.
How did you guys find it?